Welcome everybody to the breastfeeding class today. I'm going to talk about a couple of subjects. One is very controversial. The second one, I am not a specialist. It's going to be about postpartum. And I am not a specialist in postpartum. But what I wanted to discuss about it would just be a little bit of part of breastfeeding, and I want to touch on it. Let's just put it that way. So the first thing I want to talk about is co-sleeping, which is, like I said, very, very controversial. This video probably won't be very long, just for the fact that, you know, the subject and what I have to say about them isn't going to be a whole lot, so it shouldn't be a very long video. Every mom has her own opinion about co-sleeping and whether or not she will co-sleep with her baby. Now, you might ask what co-sleeping means. Most people, when you hear co-sleeping, they mean the baby sleeps in the same bed as you and your spouse. Another person could think that you mean the baby sleeps in the same room as you. And in my mind, what we're talking about is co-sleeping in the sense that the baby sleeps in the same bed as you. Now, there are a lot of co-sleepers that have been made that connect to the bed to make it safer for your baby at night if you are one of those moms who wants to co-sleep. I do not have an opinion on this as far as, or I should say, I have an opinion, but I am not going to talk about my opinion. What I'm going to talk about is why it is, you know, something that you need to be very careful if you choose to do, why you get such negative response about it, and that if you choose to do it, just thinking always of safety. One of the reasons that I don't talk like much about my opinion is because the way I had my children, the one thing I did not do was I never kept them in my room long enough where they could wake up, and I mean like as they were growing, because I wanted them in their own room before they were 1 year old. Just because I didn't want them to get attached to my room. I don't like sharing my bed, and I feel that the bedroom is your and your husband's sanctuary, and that's where you guys connect, and that should stay that way. So when I think of co-sleeping, what I think of it as when it's a benefit and when it's safe is those first few months when you're breastfeeding constantly and you're up most of the time. And another thing I want to mention is while you and your baby are learning to breastfeed, it is just better to get up and feed them, even if you just sit up in your bed to feed them, because first of all, there are two positions that we always will tell moms are positions you should use once you and baby are comfortable with breastfeeding. So you have the sideline, which is lying down position, and the actual cradle. Now, I'm not saying you can't do those, because some babies and moms do great at those positions. But the other positions, which is the crossover position or the football hold, I feel you have better control. If you're doing it correctly, you have better control over your baby and over your breast. When you just cross cradle, you're without an arm. So if you learn how to cross cradle, you'll still have an arm free, plus the way you will hold them will give you control of their head when they latch and when they come off and moving around and all that, because the butt of them should be here and the back of their neck and head should be in your arm, in your hand. So lying down can be hard because the pressure on the breast can cause milk to go everywhere. And when a baby is struggling latching, it's really hard when you're laying down. And the same with just a regular cradle hold. But when you can sit up and use your pillows and get situated to make it easy for you and for your baby, it'll go much better. And that usually, it just depends on you and your baby as to how long it takes you guys to learn to breastfeed well and to feel comfortable at it. You'll know when that is. It doesn't have to be a month or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. You'll know when you and your baby are doing well with breastfeeding. When the breastfeeding has finally just, soared and you're doing great at it. Sometimes you can think you're doing great and then find out you're not doing so great. And that's okay. You'll just, figure it out as you go along. There's always learning points and curveballs that come along, and you just kind of have to go with them and do the best you can. That's just the way breastfeeding is. So those two positions are really important to try to wait a little bit until you're really good at it. So at night, a lot of moms choose to co-sleep because the baby is there. Now, for me, every child was different because every situation I was in was different. So in the beginning, I was in a 1-bedroom apartment, and even before that, it was even smaller. It was like a little room with a twin bed that I had to share with my husband, and then I would lay the bassinet on the floor. The thing that you need to do is you need to find a comfort zone where you feel your baby is safe, and it also helps you feel like you can still breastfeed without getting up and moving around, and you don't want to fall asleep with them there either. Does it happen? Yes. It happens to every mom. But of course you want to try not to. You want to, try to sit up. I think sometimes a chair is even, people talk about sitting in a chair, and I'm like, well, you can fall asleep in a chair too. And the danger can be just as great. So you've got to find what works for you. Always be safe. No matter what you choose to do, always be safe. Try to make the best choices so that your baby is safe. Smothering can happen. That's the biggest thing that tends to happen. And if let's say your baby is a preemie, or you had a C-section, or you had an epidural, or high on medication, you had a lot of medication is what I mean, or your baby is extremely sleepy from either medication or your medication that you had, or from being a preemie, or just from the labor being rough, that can be dangerous for breastfeeding in bed, laying down, because of the fact that you could fall asleep into such a deep sleep that you don't realize, or feel or hear anything. And the baby also could be in such a deep sleep that they can't even fight because they are asleep. I've never had it where my baby couldn't push the breast away from them. When they're newborn, they don't know how to turn their head, but they do try. Like they do, if they feel that they're struggling with the breast at all, they do move from it, and they move around a lot and get a little frantic. If you're not on medication, and in my case, I never slept. I could never fall asleep because I knew that I was going to be getting up again in another or whatever. But there were times when I would fall asleep breastfeeding. As soon as I woke up, I would scoot them over into their bassinet. It was easier to do when they slept longer. So when they got to that 3 or 4 hour stretch, then I got less time where they would be in the bed with me or that I would fall asleep with them. Typically, they were only in the bed with me while I fed them, and then they were back in their bassinet. But it can take a couple weeks to get to where the baby doesn't wake up every time you push them to the bassinet. So you have to find your own way. There was a time when I had a huge bed in a guest bedroom on the floor, and that's where I went with the baby. And the baby was on one side of the bed, and I was on the other, and I also had their bassinet on the floor just in case I was asleep on that side and I could lay them there. My aim was always to get them into their own spot after I was done feeding. So that would always be your aim, is to just get them into a safe spot after you've fed them. And the bedroom part of it, like keeping them in the room, what I used to do is there's this very small window of time when they're still too little to wake up and know where you are. Like once they wake up and can look and know that that's the part of the room you're in, that's when it can get really difficult to move them from your room. So around 4 or 5 months old is usually the time that I moved them into their own room and into a crib. I never had them in a crib until around then. And that is also the same time when the bassinet starts to become a little bit dangerous because they can now get up on all fours and like literally be higher than the bassinet. So, as far as like them sleeping in the same room with you, that is your choice. If you decide to keep their crib with you in your room and that's where you want them, that's your choice. My opinion is that is your and your spouse's sacred place to connect and to talk and to have each other there alone, separate from the baby, because the only way you're going to be able to be good parents is if you're good, friends and husband and wife. So around 4 or 5 months is a good time period to get that baby into their own room. So that's my little spiel about co-sleeping. What was the other one? I went to postpartum. So let's touch on postpartum just a tad. And the only thing I'm going to say about it is if you're finding yourself obsessing over something like you're so afraid your baby's going to die, and I don't mean what all mothers do where you test to see if the baby's breathing, but you're dreaming about it and you're fearing it and it makes you wake up in a sweat and this is all part of postpartum. These are actually ways that postpartum can display themselves. If you are questioning everything you do to the point where you are stressed and overly anxious, those are signs as well of postpartum, and they could be showing themselves in that way. So I'm going to urge you that if you are really struggling with some of those emotions, being overly anxious or overly stressed about anything, to go talk to your doctor, because getting a little bit of help for postpartum will go a long way. And that's just something I wanted to throw into the video because I think it's really important. And it's displaying itself in ways that most moms would not consider postpartum. Because in the beginning, you cry a lot, you don't even know why you're crying. To you, that's postpartum. But when that passes, you think you're good and everything's fine. But it might not be. So if you're finding some of those other the best thing I would describe it is, if you're overly anxious to the point you're not sleeping very well, or you have horrible dreams that wake you up, and leaving your baby is stressful, just, talk to your doctor and get the help that you need. So that is my spiel. That is the class for today. I will try to get it uploaded this week, but I am on vacation and the internet is very slow. So if I do not get it up, I will have it up by next week. You guys all have a great day, and I will see you in our next video. Bye.